On September 13th, Azerbaijan launched a major attack into Armenia's east and south. Azerbaijani forces shelled numerous Armenian towns and cities. The fighting left 105 dead on the Armenian side and 71 dead on the Azerbaijani side. To discuss the role of some of the international players here, I'm joined by Russia and CIS country analyst Lilit Gevorgian. So, Ms. Gevorgian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
You know, many analysts are pointing to a connection between what is happening in Ukraine at the moment and what's happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's major attack occurred just after the Russian front in the Kharkiv Oblast in Ukraine seemingly collapsed and Ukrainian forces made significant advances. Do you think there is a connection between the two? And if so, what is the connection?
Well, first of all, a large-scale attack that we've seen takes months to prepare, and Azerbaijan has been preparing logistically for this sort of operation for a while. I highly doubt that they expected what happened in Ukraine with Russian forces. So I would disagree with that suggestion. I know that it's quite widespread, and it also leaves an impression as if Azerbaijan is challenging Russia in the region. I would argue that it's quite opposite. I think this was a measure that they had in mind should Armenia refuse to expedite the signing of the so-called peace treaty, which is another word for a really capitulation.
And the CSTO, which is a Russian-led military alliance of which Armenia is a member, I'd like to discuss that. The head of the CSTO was meant to be in Armenia today, but he has postponed his visit. On top of this, the CSTO made it clear that it would not send peacekeepers to Armenia, even though Armenia had appealed to the organization for military assistance. There is a lot of negative sentiment right now in Armenia with regards to the CSTO. What do you think of the CSTO's role in the latest fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
I think there's no role. It's a stillborn organization. It's effectively Russia's failed answer to NATO. The only function that it potentially can deliver is prop up a government in case of a civil unrest. In a conflict like Armenia and Azerbaijan, especially given Russia's effective tacit support for what Azeris are doing, there is absolutely no prospect of having any significant serious involvement of CSTO or even Russian forces to that matter.
And the EU too is receiving criticism. Many see the major gas deal that was brokered between the EU and Azerbaijan this summer as having emboldened Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Do you agree that the EU is losing leverage, in your opinion? The EU is also positioning itself as a mediator with regards to the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. How does that influence its role in the region?
Well, I think they have always been quite reluctant players in some ways. The EU has made emphasis on soft power and supporting civil society and so forth. Strategically, EU does not necessarily have a vision for the region, I would argue, and the gas deal or agreement on potential increase of Azeri gas supply is part of a EU leadership drive to really go to every single non-Russian supplier, considering the energy supply crisis and troubles that the European bloc is facing. It's a different question that effectively at the moment Azerbaijan does not really have the capacity to significantly increase its gas supply, and I think the Azeri president has alluded to this in during his visit to Italy. They promised to do something in the coming years, which is not good enough for EU. I think when it comes to Armenia, Azerbaijan talks and a mediating position. Once again, I'd argue that at least on the Armenian side, it was an ill-judged decision. Armenia, if they are seeking a Western mediation as a significant power that would have an influence and can bring sort of de-escalation, I would argue that there are other more significant players, individual countries such as United States or France, and I would even bring UK into this, although it has been an outsider. If EU is a large organization, it's a highly bureaucratic organization. It does not really have the capacity or the resources to fully understand the conflict, and it can simply offer good offices, but nothing of substance beyond that.
And some observers also raise this question. Seemingly, EU statements as it pertains to the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan leave out the question of the issue of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is an absolute fundamental for the Armenian side. Meanwhile, Russian statements in the same context seemingly are calling for the issue of the status of Nagorno-Karabakh to be left to a later date. This, according to some Armenian observers, is preferable for the Armenian side. So I'm wondering what you think about this argument that the Russian approach may be preferable compared to the EU's mediating approach.
I have to question the sources of these suggestions. As I described earlier, the EU does not have an expertise in this conflict. It stepped in later into the mediation role and doesn't really suggest or work on roadmap. It is the Minsk group that has done work in the region and with regards to the conflict. What Armenian side has done, they have engaged Brussels as a mediator, but they have put forward potential solutions, and I would even suggest that perhaps that decoupling of the Nagorno-Karabakh issue and the so-called peace deal came also from Yerevan. Having listened to the Armenian political leaders, that is something that they have been entertaining as well. As far as Russia concerned, for them, it's critical that whatever Armenia and Azerbaijan undertake, ultimately it's absolutely synchronized with their effort, that it has a okay from Moscow. And more broadly, a Russian answer to any serious Western involvement, meaning the Minsk group or any other bilateral involvement, is the 3+3 format. 3+3 is an effort by Russia and Turkey and Azerbaijan, as well as Iran, to push out any serious Western involvement in conflict resolution. If Brussels is happy to, in some ways, rubber stamp what Russia sees as a favorable solution, and EU, as I mentioned earlier, does not have a strategic vision over the region and potentially could rubber stamp something that is also favorable for Russia, then I don't see any major conflict of interest there. I would see a more significant tensions if Armenia seriously engaged United States in the process.
I want to come to that, Lilit, because there is major speculation going on right now in Armenia that it was the United States that brokered this ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As Azerbaijan's attacks continued, the tone coming out of Washington seemingly changed. The US Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, called Azerbaijani president Ilham Aliyev, calling on him to cease hostilities. They recognized that what was happening within Armenia proper, and that civilian targets were being shelled. What do you think about this speculation about the US's sudden involvement? Do you think that it is true? What do you think when you were hearing about this?
I'm not sure why we're calling it speculation. I wouldn't call it speculation. There have been several reports and there have been press releases by the US State Department. There have been also press releases on the conversations that Antony Blinken as well as other officials have had, particularly with Azerbaijan. There has been a clear statement by the US refuting the initial Azeri claim that the so-called special operation, a term that they seem to have borrowed from Russians in the Ukraine conflict, that it was not provoked by Armenia, but rather whatever was happening on Armenia's sovereign territory. I think strategically, perhaps Azerbaijan has made a mistake. If their narrative for, I would say, over 2 decades was one of defending themselves, from an aggressor, although Armenia has never been labeled as an aggressor, they have now gone against their own narrative, and to launch a large-scale attack, calling it special operation of demilitarization of a neighboring country, and to force a deal, which is particularly, that method has been banned for over half a century under several conventions. These are significant red lines, and US as a upholder of these international norms will have to have a more clear position. And I would contrast that with the Russian position, which effectively is challenging those rules and would prefer, once again, to resolve the current situation within the formats that it has created together with Turkey and Iran.
Well, Lilit Gevorgian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.